Hello, hello, and welcome to Limitless Talks. This is the very first episode of this new podcast that focuses on limitless leadership and how experience becomes a growth lever on the boardroom. I am your host, Camila Ferreira, an award winning CX leader, an international speaker, and an author of Long Live CX, available on Amazon. Today, I have the pleasure to welcome James Oyola to talk about a topic that I love leading global teams. James, like me, he's also an author and a speaker, and he is involved in the biggest sports event of this year. I'm going to let him introduce himself and let us know what he does to transform experience into business growth. So, James, welcome.
Hey, welcome, Camila. Thank you for having me. I'm grateful to be here. My name is James Oyola, married, father of four. I've been in the BPO, business process outsource customer care space for the better part of the last 20 years, just serving with retailers such as Walmart.com, Sprint Wireless, Home Depot. And I've had the pleasure and the honor of leading teams domestically and internationally in Jamaica, Belize, South Africa, and obviously here in the US. And I'm super grateful for all that I've learned throughout my career. Small fun fact, I spent about 8 years as a sports writer. That's what I went to college for. So I was a national sports journalist for 8 years of my life. It's one of my passions. I just published my second book called The Helpful Leader, which is a psychosocial, cross-cultural perspective on effective leadership in the workplace. So again, thank you for having me. I'm glad to be here.
Oh, absolutely. And just by listening to you, a father of four, second book, have led kind of teams all over the globe. I'm pretty sure you have a lot to share, and I can't wait till we start this conversation about global teams. And like yourself, I'm not originally from the US, I'm originally from Brazil, but also have had the chance to lead teams from different cultures, for different countries. And of course, it poses different challenges. Like it's completely different when you are surrounded by your culture, when you speak the same language, when you know to read what is not necessarily written. So for us to kick off this conversation, I have come up with some questions, but I also wanted to invite our audience to edit their comments, to ask questions, and I'll make sure to keep an eye so we bring them to our conversation as well. But for us to kick this off, when leading large global teams, which leadership behaviors break first, in your opinion, particularly when we are under pressure, and which ones actually scale? So, what have you learned throughout your journey about this?
Good question. I think I'll start with the what breaks pressure. I think, when leading large teams globally, I think the first thing is just emotional regulation. I think when a leader receives a task, a project, like you mentioned, right now, I'm working on the World Cup project right now with my current employer. Man, the emotions can get in the way. So I think emotional regulation is one thing that would break consistent communication, I would say, and just being patient with the process. It's really, we get excited and it's kind of hard to see. And so I think for a leader, those are like the first three things that I would say one would have to keep in composure. One of my favorite behaviors that I would say would help in this would be vulnerability-based trust. Just creating a culture, I think, of a leader being vulnerable with his or her team, just to ensure that the team understands where the leader is within themselves. And obviously being clear with the values and, how we drive, the goal at hand and the ability to empower. I think, those three, empowering, drive, being clear of the values and establishing a foundation of vulnerability really helps the team see the leader in a way that's trustworthy and willing to follow. And if you have people that are willing to follow you, regardless of the task size or the time frame that you have with which to complete it, I believe it will get done effectively.
Oh, I love that you mentioned vulnerability. And in my experience, James, when my first international assignment was in Colombia,
Okay.
a country that I knew before living in there, but I don't know, it's completely different experience when you visit the country, when you live in the
Sure.
country, right?
Sure.
And one of the things that happened to me when I look back 15 years ago was imposter syndrome,
Mm.
because I was living in a completely different culture, even though, and this is one of the things that sometimes happens. I knew the country before living in the country, so I kind of assumed how the culture works, if you will.
Right.
So once I moved and things just start kind of shaping differently than what I was expecting, I start judging myself, and imposter syndrome kicked in. You were mentioning vulnerability, and I just kind of went back on time because it was hard for me to be vulnerable in a culture that I did not know,
Mm.
right? Because I think when you are in your home country and you are dealing with different cultures, of course it poses different challenges. But when you are out of your home country and you not only have to deal with different cultures, but you are not, the foundation is not your kind of your
Right.
home country foundation, it challenges you even more. So I completely agree with you on the vulnerability. I think this is how we build trust with people kind of understanding that you were there to be a part of something bigger. It's
Right.
truly important. But sometimes we put ourselves in situations where how to be vulnerable is different,
Yeah.
right?
That's right. Yeah.
And
True.
in my case, I almost got back to Brazil
Mm.
because I reached a point where I was like, well, nobody likes me. I don't understand how things work. I'm doing my best. And one of the mistakes that I committed was work even harder and not necessarily smarter. Uh,
Mm.
so the level of stress, the level of pressure that I was putting on myself was higher than average. And the combination was bombastic, was kind of the worst, because I was not only pushing myself harder, not allowing me to get to know the culture, to get involved, to get to know people. And it just creates kind of a very negative ripple effect, if you will.
Oh yeah.
Right. So I'm glad that you brought this topic, vulnerability, because
Yeah.
it's true. This is how we build trust. But it's also important that it starts with us,
Sure.
right? That we are
Sure.
true to ourselves and we kind of respect our feelings and what we are going through. Because
Right.
otherwise, if you do not, if you fall far from who you are, it's going to become harder for you to lead.
Oh yeah. And I just will add to that. I think the key to establishing vulnerability based trust is in our humanity. It's not when the task is assigned. You know, I at once upon a time I led a team of 90 people, and they were in South Africa, they were in Jamaica, and they were in the United States. And so we had tasks, and we had, certain escalated, priorities that, thousands of dollars, and if you add that, by the end of the year, a few millions of dollars were at stake. And I think establishing vulnerability based trust is not when the task is given, but it's in my first day in the office. Like day one of my employment is how I do that, through my humanity. I'm a husband, and I'm a father, and I'm a brother, and I'm a son. And so just relating, with my team, obviously professionally, but getting to meet them where they are, getting to understand who they are, so that when those tasks come, they know that, hey, I'll stay overtime for James. I'll come in early for James because I know that he has my best interests at heart. So for anyone watching this, I would encourage, don't wait till the big task is assigned to establish that. I think in your very first day in the office is where you build or break that relationship and credibility.
Oh, absolutely. I can agree more with you. And I think this gets even more important nowadays that we are living this AI era, right? Where people are kind of heads down on AI. Sometimes you have two people sitting side by side, but texting to each other. And we are
Sure.
under appreciating the value of the human connection. That is so important. Yesterday, I was having a conversation with a friend of mine on how hallucinating we are about AI. And I hope that Of course, this is something new and we are learning and brings a lot of benefits, but nothing, in my opinion, replaces the human connection.
No.
And I
No.
do hope that we learn this through AI as well, that we can get many benefits, right, from the
Right.
AI, but that we also value the power of connection, the
Oh yeah.
power of the value of the human being sharing the experiences, as you were saying before anything. You are a son, you are a brother, you are a father, you are a spouse. So you are the human person that comes with so many experiences that no one can replace.
Yeah. And I think the beauty of, cross-cultural leadership and leading global teams is there's a beauty and it's an intentionality, instead of identifying ways that we're different, right? What about trying to look for ways that we're similar? And, me going to South Africa for work or Jamaica, Belize, what have you, for me, I like to think about what I call a universal language. We all have a language that we speak. Um, Laughter looks the same in South Florida, where I currently live, in Asia, in Ireland. Laughter looks the same.
Mhm.
Tears of pain look the same. Excitement looks the same, right? So we all have certain universal languages within our human soul that is similar, right? And so I, for one, have found it very effective to continue to focus on that. I like to make people laugh, right? I like to respect people's space. I like to give people time to feel, right, and respect their pain, whatever they're going through in life. And so focusing more on speaking the universal language that you have with someone has been highly more effective for me than, you know, identifying the ways that we're different. Because I think when you address those commonalities, when you talk about leading teams, then you can take a group of people very far, which would better the business, but it also would better the people within the business.
Oh, yes. Oh, my goodness. Absolutely. I can agree more with you. One of the things that I normally say about living abroad or living in a different culture is that you have to develop the ability of reading what's not written,
Oh, that's good.
of listening of what is not said, and
Hmm.
experiencing what is not necessarily delivered, because
Hmm.
this is culture, right? So when you are among yours, in your family or in your community or in the company that you work for, you kind of develop this ability. And this
Yeah.
is kind of a natural. Oh, I know how Americans in general react in those kind of situations, the same as me. So I know how Brazilians react. And sometimes I do attend meetings where I have Brazilians in the room and other nationalities. It's easier for me to read the room because I know the culture,
Right. Right.
right? But when you are kind of a leading or working with different cultures, or when you are not in your home country, this is the ability that you have to develop. And
Sure.
sometimes leaders avoid or misrepresent the power and the value of doing this. And
Hmm.
that's when we start misinterpreting things.
Right.
So, I don't know, maybe we Brazilians, we laugh a lot. And it's not necessarily the case in America. Americans are more
Right.
straightforward. There is
Sure.
no right or wrong. There is different. But
Yep.
then because I'm used to having people laughing in meetings, and I'm gonna have a meeting with Americans and nobody laughs, how do I leave? I leave under the impression that I did not do well, that I did not deliver my message. And
Yep.
that's when imposter syndrome kicks in.
Yep.
So those are the nuances that I believe leading global teams, working with different cultures is so important. And then the power of vulnerability, what you just said. Who is James? Right? On a personal side, what are your preferences? What is your kind of a working style? Getting to know each other, connecting to each other in those early days are so important and makes a significant difference in leadership.
Yeah. And if I could just kind of contribute to what you said, you talk about human connection. It also goes back to the identity of the leader. When I accept a position at a company, why did I accept it? Like my first day, is my goal just individual success? Is my goal to increase my reputation and strengthen my resume? Or do I feel like I have a more deeper purpose in this world, maybe a responsibility to humanity, first to be a good person, and then hopefully I can help other people be good people as well. And by good, I mean just respectful, kind, considerate, compassionate. We live in a very individualistic society, and so I think for me, it's also been beneficial, and a lot of that goes to my faith as well. Just understanding that me being here in this world is not for me, and so when I take on a new job, man, I'm interested to get to know the person on the other side of the table, because they are, they're a brother or a sister in humanity, even though I don't know them. I would love to know about their family, their culture, their children, because why? Because for me, my personal goal is to contribute to society as a whole, as opposed to just being the director or the senior director. Titles are just names on papers, but living a life of purpose, that's where you can achieve that human connection that you spoke about earlier, in my opinion.
Oh my goodness, this is a masterclass for whoever wants to be a leader in this world, right? And as I said before, I do hope that we start appreciating and valuing more the power of connection, the power of humanity. And I also saw the other day a post, and I think it was in one of those platforms, saying that we should work for others. That's what we should do, right? For others, in the meaning that looking for connection and understanding, as you correctly said, whoever is on the other side of the table, what are the expectations? What are you here for? Of course, we all have bills to pay. We are also looking for our paycheck at the end of the month, but there is a lot more beyond this, right? So why do we do what you do? And sometimes, and in my career, I have experienced this. I've always tried, as you said, to connect to people, understand their expectations, their dreams. I love doing this. I love kind of listening to their stories. And I have identified throughout my professional life that I had people working in my team that were not necessarily a good fit for them. And I helped them to find their way, their path, right?
Yeah.
So it's not me against you. No, we are in this together. And if it's not a good fit for you here, I am sure there is a good fit for you somewhere else. It doesn't make you better or worse. It
Right.
makes you different. And let's look for the place that is a perfect fit for you.
And you mentioned, that's a good point, because you mentioned about tasks, and going back to what I said about individualistic society. If me, the leader, is talking to employee number A, let's say, I have to help them understand how the task completion benefits them, right? Because I think there's three entities that are being helped when you complete a task, right? There's the organization at large, right? And then there's the customer, right? I'm in the customer care business, so there's the customer, and then there's the individual, the employee. And I think
Mhm.
sometimes organizations fail to capture that last piece. I think we just keep hammering in how the business needs to win, or we hammer in how the customer needs to win. But I've rarely seen, an organization communicate that message and include the benefits outside of a bonus, the benefits to the employee. And I think if I didn't understand employee number A, and that, his paychecks help put him through college, or he's a caregiver for a sick sibling, right? Then I wouldn't be able to use that as motivation for him, not weaponize it, but to use it and say, hey, listen, man, if we stay later, and this can help us all, and maybe this gets you one step closer to graduating next semester. Because now I've invested and I care about them, not only as professionals, but as people. And so I think we have to do a good job of those three components winning in any given task completion. Yes, the business first, the customer second, but the one who's actually executing the task, we can't leave them out either.
Yeah, I can agree more with you. And as a CX professional, I would say I would kind of rank the employee as number one. Everything starts
Sure.
with them. And
Yep.
I used to say that you can only give what you have. So, James, if you do not have a good experience as an employee, how can I hammer you to deliver a good experience to the client?
Yep.
You don't know,
Right.
right? So if internally, if your team, there is no alignment with your team, if there is no leadership in place, if there isn't a good and friendly environment, how can I pick up the phone and just try to deliver this? It's gonna look fake and
Yep.
sound fake. And why? Because this is not what I'm experiencing.
Mm-hmm.
However, if as a leader you truly promote a friendly environment, as you said, you get to connect with individuals because,
Right.
of course, the individuals they become a team. But a team, what is a team at the end of the day? It's a group of people.
Yeah. Right.
What are they looking for? What are their expectations? So, even though the two of us are in the same team, we are there for different personal reasons. We are going to agree on the business goal. What are we trying to achieve as a team, as part of this kind of organization? But
Right.
individually, I am there because I want to kind of maybe graduate, or I am attending an MBA, or I want to become a mother, a parent. I don't know.
Right.
There are so many reasons that we have in life. And if I try to incentivize the two different people in the same way, the only thing I know is that at least with one, we're going to fail
Yeah.
because
Right.
they have different objectives. But
Sure.
if on the other hand, I try to connect and I kind of I use the right incentives for the right person, that's when the combination of each individual gets greater or better than the sum of them, because
Yep.
it extrapolates, it expands at the end of the day. So to me, as I was telling you, as a customer experience leader, for every single organization that I have the chance to work for in the area of a customer experience, I always started with the employee,
Yep.
understanding what it was the culture. And I think if I haven't posted this post that is coming in quite soon about the frequency that we survey our employees
Oh yeah.
compares to the frequency that we survey our clients. When
Oh
you
yeah.
compare, you're going to realize that in 99%, if not 100, I doesn't want to say 100 here because there might be some organizations out there that do this differently, but 99% of the time, we survey our customers, our clients, way more often than we survey our employees. And
It's true.
moreover, when we survey, we rarely take actions out of the feedback.
Mm-hmm.
So if you
Right.
think customer care, customer support, customer experience, okay, we survey. If the clients complain about something, you go talk to product or finance or human resources, whichever department that can address that pain from your client. What do we do when an employee complain about something?
Right.
What are
Right.
the actions that we actually take to improve the experience of that employee, to actually enrich that company culture? So one is we rarely survey them, and even less take actions out of the feedback, which drives disengagement, dissatisfaction, attrition, which in turn does not help with the business. That's why I always say, to me, everything starts with the employee. That vulnerability that you mentioned, the connection on the human level and an individual level, for us to understand how as a team we can be more successful and in turn help the business as well.
Yeah, and when you talk about global leadership, I think, there's a good book by Gary Chapman who wrote The Five Love Languages, but he has a book called The Five Languages of Appreciation in the Workplace. And the premise is similar, which, like you said, if you have three different employees, they may feel appreciated three different ways. And so it would be in the best interest of the leader to understand that, right? And I love what you mentioned about surveying, but also too, I think leaders have to take on an identity, right? Just because you have a title in front of your name, that doesn't necessarily mean that you have a leadership identity. Because when you have a leadership identity, then you're more intentional, right? Much like you, I believe in the inverted pyramid. I believe in servant leadership, right? And so if you have a leadership identity, then you would stick to that. Because yes, you're right. Unfortunately, the surveying and the analysis and the understanding is heavily focused on either competitors or customers or clients, but rarely the actual people who make up the business. And those are the people who, as it's said in this country, they keep the lights on. And so, yeah, I think for any leader, and sometimes we're so caught up in our responsibilities, right? We have calls, and I mentioned this a lot in the book. Like I use an example of in Jamaica, I had a call and I was trying to save an account, and I walked by my team and I just kind of just gave them like a head nod. It was in the morning, and I just kept walking because I was on a call. I came back around like 2 hours later. Thankfully, it was a successful call, and I said hello to them, and some of them were offended. And I was asking them like why, and then I learned that in the Jamaican culture, like pleasantries mean something very special to them. And so they would have preferred even being on the call to intentionally take 1 second to just properly not shake everyone's hand, but give them a little bit more proper greeting than a head nod, so that they can feel acknowledged. And so because I have a leadership identity that I try to uphold, then it's my responsibility to take that feedback and apply it. And I think a lot of leaders don't necessarily do that, especially when you're leading global teams, because maybe they haven't settled on their identity. Who am I as a leader? What do I want to achieve as a person who holds this position, as opposed to the position holding the person? Those two perspectives are different.
Oh, completely different. And we have here the audience reacting to what we are talking in leadership identity. I think, like the example you just shared about greeting in the morning, it is
Yeah,
very cultural,
sure.
right? Maybe if you were working with Americans, their reaction would have been completely different.
Right.
But if you do not, whenever you are leading global teams and you have Jamaicans and you have Americans in the same team, you need to understand how they operate.
Yes.
Because otherwise, in that particular case, Jamaicans would have been offended by not being greeted in the morning, and nothing would have happened with the Americans because they would understand, and that is totally fine. But you cannot operate with just half of the team.
And if I could just interject too, I think another concept that leaders don't consider, at least I haven't heard many talk about, is unintentional offense. You can offend someone intentionally, but you can offend someone unintentionally. And
Okay.
I think it's obvious if we offend someone intentionally that we don't do that. But if we were able to spend more time, nonverbal communication is important to me. I have my 4 children, they're 21, 18, 8, and 6. And my 8 and 6-year-old, I'm already teaching them nonverbal communication, because that to me speaks a lot more than what you actually say. But as leaders, if we can consider the concept of unintentional offense, whether it's how you write an email or how you respond, like your first question, like what breaks the behavior, like how you respond under pressure. You might not intentionally say anything wrong, but just your tone and your temperament, might offend someone. And in my place of business now, I work with people from Russia, North Africa, Ireland, India, I mean, all over the globe, because we are working on a project that's global. And the awesome thing about this diverse environment is I've learned how to say good morning in Arabic, right? I don't have to do that,
Say it,
but I'm
say it.
intentional. Yeah, it's Sabah al Khair, which is good
Wow.
morning. And then their response would be Sabah al Nur, right? And so that's good morning, or good morning to you too. I didn't have to learn that. But to me, I felt, you know what? It would be very arrogant as an American to just expect everyone in this country, since you're working here, to play by here rules. Where for me, again, my identity has nothing to do with where I'm from or the position I hold. It has to do with loving my neighbor as myself. And so my neighbor, my coworker, who is from, let's say, North Africa, and they speak Arabic, man, it would be really cool for our work relationship if I can learn how to say good morning in their native tongue, as opposed to only limiting them to my native tongue. But again, that I have to be intentional with that. And so, man, for any leaders listening to this, a lot of the work is internal for us to lead teams. Like, we can have all the degrees, we can have great processes, which are necessary. But the internal work that it takes to, again, that human connection, I think really goes a long way from someone who works for you versus someone who works with you. I think they're different.
Oh, totally. And by listening to you, I was thinking of this unintentional offense, right? It's nowadays not being present. One of my
Yeah.
mentoring programs is about executive presence. People come to me and say, Camila, I'm not getting promoted. I over deliver. I check all the boxes, but I still don't get promoted. And the very first thing that I start asking or digging into is executive presence. That it starts with being present.
Right.
Nowadays, being present is so rare.
Yeah.
If you look
Especially.
around, right? If you look around at work or out of work, you go to a restaurant, you have a family sitting around the table with two or three people on their phones. I'm like,
Yeah.
no. So
Yeah.
I think they have shaken our values. So we sit
Oh,
around the
yeah.
table. I come from a very kind of a big family. We sit around the table and we celebrate. We connect to each other. This is the moment that we have to connect
Oh,
to
yeah.
each other. Because other than that, I am work. My kids are at school. My husband is kind of out of home. We are each of us are doing our stuff, and that is totally fine. But at the time we are together, are we truly present? And people do not realize that not being present is disrespectful, in my opinion,
Oh, yeah.
right? So it doesn't mean that you do not have, you may have emergencies, that is totally fine. But I have been in one on one meetings with managers doing something else when I was there, either asking for help or sometimes trying to say something, trying to ask for help, but I couldn't because I was not kind of fulfilling the
Right.
connection. Like, how am I going to be, speaking of vulnerability, how am I going to be vulnerable if I'm not feeling the person on the other side of the table?
Oh,
If I
yeah.
cannot kind of feel the presence of that person. So I can agree more with you. And I would add to this the presence. Let's be mindful of the presence and make ourselves truly present.
Oh,
This
yeah.
is what's going to allow the connection.
I
Otherwise, we are just kind of engaging with what machines.
Right. And again, it's are we intentional with caring about how the other person feels? And everything I say now, like this is 20 years of observation. This is 20 years of learning, the hard way, right? Making mistakes. And
Of
so I'm
course.
I'm grateful to share it now, but I didn't start off with a book in my hand, as far as one that I wrote. But I remember that there were moments, in my career where I'd be maybe multitasking. I'd be in the middle of sending an email, and one of my team members would come to me for guidance. And so, yes, I consider myself a strong multitasker. So I'm listening to them, but I'm continuing the email, but I'm like looking at my computer, but they're here next to me asking a question. And I've had to learn to feel where they'll say something like, "Oh, I'll just wait till you're done." And I'd be like, "Okay, I'll just stop what I'm doing. I'll turn around and say, I'm sorry. Like, how can I help you?" Right? Because for them, I'm present. It doesn't make them feel like I care about their situation if I continue like, answering my email. I got it. And I don't even look at them. And so a lot of these intangibles are important, in life, period. But again, just talking about global leadership too, we have to be mindful that, you know, sayings in America, like the early bird gets the worm, right? We say that in this country a lot. We know what it means. But what does that mean for someone who's from Germany? Nothing.
Yes.
Like what does that mean for someone who, you're running a call center in Cape Town? That doesn't translate. And so I think again, there's a large responsibility on the leader, greater than their academic achievements, greater than any process they can create. That interpersonal relationship, I think, is where the leader is really won or lost. Or rather, I should say, where their team is won or lost, and how effective they can be as a unit.
Yeah. You just reminded me that I have a business partner. He's American. And more recently, he's constantly thanking me for speaking in English.
Hmm.
And I just kind of, to me, I'm in the US, so I'm going to speak English. So I take it for granted. It was like,
Right.
no, this is not your mother language. So you have to make an
Mhm.
extra effort, one, to learn the language
Right.
and to make yourself clear. And he was telling me, I really appreciate your effort. You see, sometimes we just take things for granted just because we are here in this country. Of course, I am kind of the immigrant. I am the one coming from outside. Of course, that I need to understand the culture, the language. But I also feel very much appreciated when people recognize my effort, right? It's a second language, as you were telling. Idiomatic expressions does not come flawlessly. So when you're gonna learn, it takes time. Not only for you to learn the words, the pronunciation, but the meaning and when and how to use this. And sometimes by not using this properly, you can also be misinterpreted. So there is a lot around kind of a communicating, connecting, and it's so kind of a valuable when you find someone like yourself, a leader like yourself, that is truly focused on connecting on an individual level, on understand what are the not only the expectations but also the limitations. Sometimes we just assume people can do a couple of things, but they may not know. And one of my managers in my professional life, she used to say, Camila, we never assume, we always check, because
Mm.
it may be, I don't know, simple to you, but it might not be for others. And the fact that you are assuming, you were posing such a kind of a big responsibility on others before asking.
Yeah.
But
Oh yeah.
as you said, it took me years to learn those things, right? So first, I think that we operate in a more automatic mode, if you will. But
Yeah.
this is the beauty of leadership, that we can truly develop, and moreover, that we can shape the leadership we want to deliver,
Oh yeah, that's good. I
right?
love that your partner coworker mentioned that, because who knows how tough learning this language was for you and everything that you did to get here. And so just that simple acknowledgement is amazing.
Right. James, you won't believe me, but we are approaching the end. I thought that time would fly, and that's exactly what happened. But I really want to leave some time for you to talk about your book. I know there is a
Sure.
second book coming in, your projects. As you mentioned, you are working
Sure.
as part of this World Cup event. So let us
Yeah.
know what you have in flight, what is exciting you the most right now.
Oh man, thank you for asking. Yeah, so I work for FWC 2026, which is a subsidiary of FIFA, and our task is to deliver the World Cup in June, which is going to be the largest World Cup in the history of the tournament. And so I'm super honored and humbled to be here as a leader in the customer care team. Yeah, so that's my day to day from Monday through Friday, and I just have my proof copy here. I just published my second book called The Helpful Leader. It's available on Amazon, Barnes and Nobles, and Walmart.com. And as I mentioned earlier, I think it's been 10 years since my first book was written, and I'm really excited about this project because I really get into the psychology and the heart posture of the leader. This is less about how to do things, and this is more about the internal work, soul health. We talk about emotional intelligence, conflict resolution, effective communication. And it's really the onus is on the leader to do the inner work within themselves so that they can handle teams properly. How do you handle a grieving team member who just lost a family member? How do you help them through that? What you don't do is tell them to leave their problems at the door. What you don't do is overemphasize that, hey, we have work to do, and you can deal with that on the weekends or after work. We don't do that. What we should do is help them process their emotions, help them learn to compartmentalize, help them understand that their feelings are real and they matter, while simultaneously helping them understand how much we need them as a coworker. And so we either create space for them to take some time off, or if that's not available, we help them through that. But a leader can't do that if they have wounds within their own heart, if they have not done the internal work within themselves, whether it be through faith or through therapy, to heal, or to identify preconceived biases, especially we're talking about cross-cultural, like what are the preconceived biases that you might have from someone from another country. So I'm really excited about the book because it's very, very deep into the psychology and the social aspect of a leader, as well as a cross-cultural aspect of a leader. And so I'm really excited about it. people perspective. And people know it's on, and I'm looking forward to hearing a lot of feedback on it.
Oh, absolutely. And I can't wait for my copy.
Did you lose me?
I I will definitely
Yes.
kind of
Yeah.
read. I love learning and in reading about leadership. This is, again, there is a never ending about leadership. We are expanding. I had a podcast with another friend the other day about how pushing ourselves out of our comfort zone helps us expand. And to me, whenever you expand, you start
Sure.
seeing the world from a completely different perspective. And what you were talking about, a helpful leader is this, is how do I put myself in somebody else's shoes? And I see the world from his or her perspective, from his perspective or her perspective, which is completely different from where you are.
Yeah.
But if you do not kind of make the
Right.
efforts to
Right.
see the world from their perspective, we will never understand their pain because it's not yours, it's theirs, and you need to be there. So yeah, first of all, congratulations. I know how hard it is to not only write but publish a book. So congratulations on the
Thank you.
second one, and congratulations on putting into words what you have experienced. We never know who can benefit from there, and it's not, what I learned is that it's not about quantity but about impact, about legacy. So if one person take those words and change their lives and approach leadership differently, then mission accomplished, right? Because
Oh
you
yeah.
were able to influence at least one person. If a million people, even better. But as I said, it's not about quantity, it's about legacy, it's about purpose, about mission.
Oh yeah. One of the quotes that I love and I try to live by is, you can count the amount of seeds in an apple, but you can't count the amount of apples in a seed. And so I love that quote because yes, that one person that was impacted by my book or your book or any other, leader who's writing books with the right heart posture, man, who knows the organizations, the clients, the customers, the employees that will benefit from that one person. Those are the apples from that one seed. And so for me, that's success. If one person could say, man, I learned a lot about myself and I want to improve in certain areas to be a better leader, and not just in corporate, we're leaders in our families, we're leaders in our communities. You might coach a sports team. This is not related or limited to, the corporate sector. I think we all, if nothing else, we're leaders of ourselves. And so for anyone to say, man, I've been enlightened by this book and I'd like to do better, I want to share it with my team, that's what brings me much gratitude and joy, because that's really what it's all about. It's just, again, my small contribution to making the world a better place.
It's about legacy. Wow, amazing. James, we could podcast and talk for hours and hours because clearly the two of us are very much passionate about leadership. But I want to
Yeah.
thank you for taking the time of being here, by sharing your thoughts on leading global teams, on leadership, and podcasting with me. I am pretty sure that the audience appreciated this very much. And this is going to be recorded. So whoever haven't had a chance to join us live, you have the chance to watch the recording. Thank you so much. And I see you all in the next episode.
Thank you for having me. Bye, everyone. Have a good day.